We're here today with Donna Dillahunty, a fifth grade teacher from Earle, Arkansas, and a two-time storyteller at Tales from the South. How did you get involved with Tales from the South?
Well, I participated in the National Writing Project in 2011, and because of that, I got to go on a writing retreat in the fall that was made up of just former attendants of the NWP, the Summer Institute. And there was a man there that had participated the summer or two before I did, and he had already presented for Tales from the South. And so I started asking questions, and that's how I found out about it. And I went online and read all the different requirements I needed to be able to submit a story.
What was the first story you did at Tales from the South?
Well, the story of itself was the one that I wrote during that Summer Institute in 2011. And it was the result of a year-long process of working through a horseback riding accident that I had that had massively changed my perspective on life itself. And during that institute, I wrote about the experience and what it was like up to the time that my helicopter, the Life Flight helicopter, flew me to the Med in Memphis.
Had you ever done anything like that before?
And not to such a wide audience, no. You know, knowing that my story was going to be broadcast on YouTube and on the radio program, and then to learn that that radio program was even broadcast internationally, I had never done anything of that scope.
When you stood up there in front of that audience for the first time, what emotions were you going through?
I was nervous prior to the time I got on the stage, or on the little stage there. I worried about eating supper before we got started for fear that I'd be sick. But once I stood in front of the audience and I started telling the story, the nerves left, because it was my story. It was me. It was all about me. And it was just pouring myself out. And the writing of the story itself was such a catharsis for me to be able to process that whole situation, and then sharing it with others just amplified that feeling. So once I got started, I had a blast.
What kind of response did you get from the audience?
It was funny because they laughed in some places that I didn't think they'd laugh, but apparently the way I told it was funny. But they all enjoyed it. I had several people after we left, or as we were leaving, after it was all over, that commented how much they enjoyed my story and that they hoped I'd write more and that I'd come back again. And I was already hooked and addicted, so I assured them that I would.
What did you come back and do the second time?
6 months later, I came back and I read a story about blackberry cobbler, and the first blackberry cobbler that I made for my husband after we got married in 1988. And it had a surprise in it.
What was the surprise?
A huge thorn that got stuck in the roof of his mouth. And there was lots of laughter with that one, as should have been.
Why did you want to share your stories?
I don't know, I guess I didn't share so much for their feedback as I did for my own personal pleasure of reading my words out loud. And that sounds hopelessly vain, I guess, but it's one thing to express your writing, express your thoughts and your feelings in writing, but quite another to be able to take those expressions that are on paper and read them out loud to other people. And that in itself was satisfaction for me.
You have some other things in the pipeline for Tales from the South. Anything you'd care to share?
I've submitted 2 other pieces, and of course, you know, the way Tales from the South works, they're constantly accepting pieces and then filing them, and they bring them out when they have a collection of stories that seems to blend together, that work well in conjunction with each other. And I have one about my grandfather, and I have another one about my husband, this time about our motorcycle rides together. We used to have a motorcycle. And the one that's in the works, hasn't been submitted yet, is about one of the biggest arguments we had in our young married life over a Nintendo game.
What do you think it is that makes Tales from the South so successful?
It's real people. I mean, not that Stephen King or any of the other published authors, not that they're not real people, but these are real people like we see every day. These are my neighbors. These are people I might run into in the grocery store. And these are their real life nitty-gritty experiences, things that definitely happened. And they're far more potent, I think, because of that, than anything we can read anywhere else or see on television. because when I listen to them read their stories on the same, the night that I'm there reading, and I listen to the other two people read, I find myself thinking, oh, that could happen to me. I could have been there. That could have been my experience as well. And then their stories spark more stories that I want to tell. And it's invigorating. And I think everybody likes to hear stories. I think we're creatures of story.
Do you think this is something anybody can do, even somebody who's not a professional writer or maybe doesn't even write a lot?
Definitely. The most interesting thing of all to me is just the other day, I asked my husband if he minded if I wrote this story of our Nintendo fight, because it doesn't paint a really mature picture of either one of us. And I wanted to ask his permission before I sent it off for publication, possible publication. And he laughed and he said, sure. He said the ironic thing was, though, that he had been thinking about writing that one up himself and submitting it to Tales from the South. And that excited me because he's never been a big writer. And my writing and my sharing and my reading is opening the door for him to think about his own life and his own experiences, and that they're worth telling, and that he might start writing too. And I can't imagine anything better than that.